Mines in Davidson, North Carolina. It is June 4th, 2024. I am Jane Shoemaker. The note taker today is Martha Perry. We are here with veteran Art Englebardt. And we're so glad you're here. Thank you for being here. Can we begin hearing a bit about where you were born and grew up, and a little bit about your family?
I was born in Brooklyn, New York, and I grew up basically in Queens. I had an older sister, and my mother and father. I went to school in Queens, kindergarten, public school, and high school, all in Queens. My parents, I grew up during the war, World War II. My father was an air raid warden. He was too old to go into the service and had a family, so he was exempt, but he was an air raid warden. I remember things like gas rationing and having a victory garden and all the other things we did during World War II. My sister is 7 years older. She was involved very much in the civil rights movement before there was a civil rights movement, going back to the 30s. Otherwise, normal kid. I played sports. I played basketball, baseball. I never did very well in school because I found out now I have what you call learning disability. Then I didn't know, but now then. Otherwise, I had a very normal childhood.
Did you go to college?
Went to NYU, and that's where I met my wife. Also went to NYU.
And what brought you to the military?
Well, I was at NYU in between Korea and Vietnam. Of course, everybody had to register, and I had to register like everybody else. But I joined the New York National Guard, which is my start with the military, where I had to go on active duty for a period of time and follow up with 6 years of National Guard.
Did you have any knowledge of the National Guard or the military before you joined?
Yeah, somewhat. The New York National Guard, which was the 107th Infantry, was called the Silk Stocking Regiment. They were very ceremonial, so any big event in New York, they were generally there.
So did you go to any kind of boot camp?
I went to basic training at Fort Dix. After my basic training, I was assigned to the 85th Engineer Platoon, and they were a combat engineer unit stationed at Dix. So I went from basic training into this engineer unit. I was supposed to be there for like 4 months, but what happened during that time, there was one of the emergencies came out that I had the Berlin Wall and things like that. They extended my stay with that thing for 2 months before I was released to go back to the National Guard.
Did you find it difficult to adjust to military lifestyle when you were going through boot camp and all of this?
Not really. I was an athlete, so that helped. But the adjustment came not so much physically, mentally is where you think, and you find out you could do things that you never thought you could do before, physically and mentally, both. I could think of one thing in basic training. We had what they call the confidence course, which is a 40-foot ladder made out of logs, and you go up 2 at a time. I went up with the person. You're supposed to go over the other side, come down the other side. I went up there with the partner. We got to the top, and he froze. I had flipped over. He froze. I looked at him. He was sheer white. He was shaking. We're 40 feet up in the air. So I called down to the sergeant. I said, "Got a problem?" He's froze. So he told me to slide over in front of him and talk him down one step at a time. I did that. I had to get down myself. So that was something where I kind of said, hey, I could do things that I wouldn't expect to do. So that was one case right there.
Your wife was still in New York at this time?
Yeah, we weren't married when I was in basic training.
Ah.
We got married later. She was, of course, married when I was in the National Guard.
So you finished your basic training. You stayed there at Fort
Dix
for 3 months, 2 months?
It was, my regular time, the 6 months I was supposed to be there, they extended for 2 more months, which was very unusual. I don't know if anybody else ever got extended. But the unit I was in was a very specialized engineering unit. And then, I don't know, the Lebanon crisis or one of the crises, and they were on first alert. So they didn't want to give anybody up. So until the crisis ended, then they let me go.
So you went back to New York, and tell me how that worked with the National Guard.
Oh, we met once a week and 2 weeks active duty in the summer, or our unit was the summer, other units were a different time. We'd go up to Camp Drum upstate New York, which was a infantry training area. Because I was in the unit I was in was an infantry unit. One of the things with us, we were also they told us at least, our unit was a first responder in case of an emergency. We would be activated before anybody. And that kind of worried my wife, and all the wives, because here we are at peace, and we're told if something happens, because we're an infantry unit and easy to be deployed because where we were and well trained, we would go. One of the things I remember were I felt I really grew up very quickly. I was made an NCO, I made a corporal. At that time, they were not making corporals, they were going to the specialist grades. An NCO is a non-commissioned officer. The specialists weren't. And I was in charge of a squad leader. I was also in the 81 millimeter mortar unit, which is something else. And I remember a week after I got promoted, the first sergeant called me in. He said, "You're going on patrol. You're going to lead a patrol tonight." Again, this is peacetime. It's not wartime. We're up in Drum. He said, "Now remember, it's peacetime. You're going to have 11 men assigned to you. Remember, in 2 weeks from now, this may not be a training thing. You may be an actual thing. Take it seriously." I grew up that night, knowing I had 11 men. I'm responsible for their lives. I was responsible.
And how old were you at that time?
I must have been 22,
Oh my goodness.
23, something like that. Young. And spent the rest of the time in the National Guard in the infantry with either the mortars, squad leaders. I didn't get out of the mortars till later on, where there's another interesting story. I was in the barracks, and someone came in and said, the CEO wants to talk to you, which generally means you're in trouble.
In what barracks?
And barracks, where we were during off hours, we didn't live in tents. We were in regular barracks.
Okay,
The only time we were in tents when we were out in the field.
gotcha.
I was told to report to this field. I go in there, and they said, well, you're being transferred out of the infantry unit into the headquarters unit, and you have to report to Major, and I don't remember the Major's name, over in supply. So I go over there, and he says, you got a job. You're going to take over what they call ration breakdown. Ration breakdown, our unit with 4 units, companies, in what they call the battle group. Ration breakdown, we get the food from quartermaster, break it down, and then take it out to the individual mess halls. I was in charge of picking up the food, dividing it up. I guess I got it because I was a college graduate. I thought I could do it. And then bring it out to the different cooks, which meant we had to be up at 3 o'clock in the morning, pick up the food, bring it out to the mess hall before breakfast, which sounds tough, but by 8 o'clock we were done for the day. So it was good. But I was a corporal.
And this was during your active duty?
Yeah, this was during the Guard, the National Guard. Again, we were one of the...
when you were on your 2 weeks?
Yeah. And you get out there, what they call an MOS, your job, what you're supposed to be, the job was called for to be a sergeant. I was a corporal. And what happened when all the trucks got to the quartermaster, I was kicked to the back all the time with all these sergeants. So I told the major, I said, you got to pull me, you got to have a sergeant. He looked and he said, okay, yeah, sergeant. I said to him, sir, you're not my company commander. He says, you're acting sergeant, go, I will talk to your CO. So I went back and I got it. The PX was opened, and we even had tailors. I got some uniforms, had sergeant stripes, so. And what happened, they waived the time period before you could become a sergeant. They allowed it, evidently waived it one time. They waived it, they made me a sergeant. So for the last 2 years of the National Guard, I had a sergeant rating.
Did you have occasion to be wearing your uniform out in public at all?
Yes, every Columbus Day, every St. Patrick's Day, our unit marched down Fifth Avenue. And any ceremonial thing, our units were basically, so we probably wore our uniforms more then than most uniforms.
This was before Vietnam.
Before Vietnam.
So there was no anger toward you.
No, not to us. Again, it was before, we were in between Korea and Vietnam. There was no anger. It's one of the more unfortunate parts of our history.
What was the camaraderie like in the National Guard? Did you make any close friends?
It was fun. I was assigned for a period of time a company. I think they were short sergeants, so because I was an NCO as a corporal, they put me in head of this one platoon made up of Irish cops, which a lot of National Guardmen were. And I was in charge, a little Jewish boy with a bunch of Irish cops, and we had a ball. they protected me. If anybody gave me a tough time, being Jewish, they'd have about 20 Irish cops on them. So, yeah, I had it good.
Not very many people can have that kind of a positive memory of their military time.
Well, again, I wasn't in combat. And if someone was shooting at me, I don't know if I'd have the memories. There's only one dangerous thing outside climbing that ladder, which is not really out there. When I was in 81 millimeter mortar, the only dangerous thing is we had a misfire, and I had to take the round out of the barrel, the tube. That was the only dangerous thing I ever did in 6 years. So I had fun in the night.
How did you feel when Vietnam started and everything changed?
Well, I was out of the Guard by then.
Yes, I know that.
No, I was older than the protesting groups. So, and I was out of college, so I didn't have that, really. I had friends who were in Vietnam. I had a friend who got killed in Vietnam. I had friends who got killed in Korea. Being that I feel very strongly myself in the Constitution of the United States. Like I had to swear to defend the Constitution. And these guys out there were defending it. And come back and get mortified or this horrible thing, doing what they were duty they were supposed to do, got me mad. But no, it passed.
Taking a step back, you mentioned that you had lots of fun. What sort of activities would you do for recreation when you were off duty?
Of course, there's always card games. It's just, we played both sports, we played ball. We slept a lot. Because when you're out those 2 weeks training with the Guard, it's work. You didn't have that much time off because they're cramping in 2 weeks of high activity. And if you're in an infantry unit, that means you're firing weapons, you're firing the mortars, you're on patrols, you're camping. We weren't clerks. I just watched The Longest Stay on television. And if you haven't seen that movie, see it. It's very accurate what happened on the beaches. If I was younger, I would have been on the beach because I was an infantryman. And it's kind of, you always have that in your mind, that because we were an infantry unit, if there was something that happened, we'd be in the heart of the combat.
Did you have children?
Later on, yeah.
And any boys? Well, it doesn't matter.
I had a boy and a girl.
What did you speak to her about military, or did you?
They were young. One of the things, one of my grandsons gave me a book to write my memories in. It's for his use. So I wrote some of the stuff that I went through. But they know I was in the Army, and they know my feeling about the Constitution, my politics. They were all basically the same as mine. That they would have basically not protested during what Vietnam. Now they may, I think they're basically, I don't know really how to describe it, but we never really got into a big discussion about the war or anything. Now my wife was too young for World War II. I grew up in the middle of it. So I remember the victory gardens and all that. So my wife has no memory of it. And when I tell her those things, it's an education for her. But when we were in the National Guard, about 3 or 4 years, she was always worried. Because I remember there was another Lebanon crisis. It was really bad. And she knew we would go if we got it. And she and some of the other wives were worried.
And you were born in what year?
1935.
So you really went through the war as a child.
I remember all the bond rides. My father was a air raid warden. I remember collecting things. I remember being in the schoolyard with the bond rallies, where the Jeep would come up and the principal would say, "Oh, we raised money for that Jeep." Of course, we didn't, but the World War II, the atmosphere was very united. We had a common enemy. There was everybody was determined they had to beat the Germans, to beat the Japanese. There was no ifs or ands or but, not like Korea. Well, Korea was basically that way too, not like Vietnam. Unfortunately, from Vietnam on, politicians started ruling, not military. And we have, well, I'll be political right now. We have a president called anybody who got killed in the war, something like stupid or whatever it is. I would take him by the neck and pull him down to Normandy Beach on June 6th and let him sit there and think. I've been to Normandy, of course, in peacetime, and it is overwhelmingly, when you look at it, to think that here's a guy who was in charge of the military, never served one day in the military. His son never served a thing, and he's telling that people who got killed was stupid. So basically that's my political statement for the day.
Your wartime childhood has probably made you, changed your feelings toward Israel and Gaza.
That's an old news. So if you look what's going on there, both are wrong. You can't condemn Israel without condemning Hamas. They both have to be condemned. The leader of Hamas says we're going to eliminate Israel. They attacked Israel. Israel attacked them back. They find rockets from schools and hospitals, but they expect Israel not to retaliate. But the amount of damage to innocent people is horrible. But I don't know the answer. I don't think anybody really knows the answer.
Taking a step back to your service, what did you do after you left the National Guard? Did you use the GI Bill at all, perhaps, to get more education?
National Guard didn't qualify.
Oh, got it.
National Guard is very strange. You have the reserves and the National Guard, are two separate things. A reserve unit, you could be pulled out as an individual back into service. National Guard, you couldn't. They'd have to take the whole unit. So there was a little bit of a difference. But again, each National Guard unit, depending what they did, made them priority. Would they be pulled in as a unit? Our unit would have been.
So what did you do after you got out of the National Guard?
Became a civilian, started working, got jobs. Eventually, my wife, she graduated from NYU Bellevue Hospital. She got a bachelor's degree and a nursery degree together. Um, I got a bachelor of science degree. Eventually, I went into marketing and sales, and I did a lot of traveling in my job. I retired with 2 million miles on Delta Airlines.
Oh my goodness.
I travel a lot.
Did you keep in touch with anyone or any of your friends from the National Guard after your service ended?
Yeah, there was one. It was interesting. I had a good fraternity brother who was in the Guard unit with me. In fact, I had 3 fraternity brothers. 2 of them I kind of lost contact, but one I stayed with. My whole life we've been friends. He passed away 2 years ago, but we were friends all the way. It's I think the National Guard, it depends on the unit. A lot of the units are from small towns, and in small town, everybody knew everybody. New York, that's not true. It came all of our unit had people from all over the city. Well, if you had went to National Guard Davidson, everybody would have known everybody.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about your views toward the military or what you learned from that time?
Well,
you talked about growing up.
Yeah, I grew up. I think I found responsibility much more serious when you're in charge of people's lives, even though it's peacetime. You think different. You're careful. Anything you do is, if I screw up, this guy could die. And that's a responsibility I took very serious. I mentioned something about the mortars. I had to take a round out of a mortar. If you know a mortar, you drop a round and it slides down and it's self-propelled. There's no trigger or anything. And you may have seen they dropped the line in and we dropped it. It didn't work. It didn't go off. It was a gunner, an assistant gunner, job to take that round out. The way you do, you pick up the back of the tube and it slides out, and the round slides out, and you have to catch it. And if it's armed, you may have 20 pounds of dynamite basically in your hands with shrapnel. I had to do that, and that I grew up quickly on that too, knowing if I drop that thing, I'm dead, and the other guy is dead, the guy with me. Everybody else were cleared. Those things make you think. You grow up fast. I think some people who were not in combat, if you're in combat, you notice most combat people very seldom will talk about it. They don't want to. So here, I was not in combat, but the dangerous things you don't want to talk about. You want to talk about the accidents that happened, the jeeps that overturned, even in peacetime. Soldiers get killed in peacetime training. It happens. Yeah, and you don't want to, you try to forget that.
What advice would you give to a young person, perhaps someone my age, that's considering service in the National Guard?
Again, it depends on the unit. I would say if you're interested in the National Guard, speak to someone who's in that unit. Talk to some of the company commanders, or they're going to, of course, the high military are going to say how great it is. Get to speak to some of the other, what kind of time. It's good income. You're getting paid. You have to have a mentality I'm trying to be very politically correct.
Don't worry.
You have to think that the democracy and the Constitution is important. If you don't think that, don't join, because you could die defending it. And unfortunately, what's going on now, I'm very much concerned over the death of democracy in this country.
You have young people today who are just lost and find the military, not the National Guard, but just going into the Army or the Navy, makes them whole again.
No, that's not the National Guard now. You talk going into the Army, you take a kid out of high school who doesn't have, not sure of his future. You say armed services may be the best place for him, because he will, first of all, he'll have his job, which is not that easy anymore. He'll learn a trade or something. He'll learn responsibility, and the career, if you like it, the retirement benefits are very good. Everything's good about it if you let it be. My brother-in-law is a West Pointer. He would have stayed in. He was a captain, but he had to get out because my sister was not an Army wife. When you're a West Pointer, that means eventually you're going to be a colonel or a general. You don't get in a fight with the major's wife when you're a captain. And that's happened. My sister had a cocktail party, and a major's wife was there, and she used the N-word, and you didn't do that with my sister. She threw her out. That basically ended my brother-in-law's career. He got out after that because it would have been good for him. But that's politics.
Did your sister have the traditional West Point military wedding and all that?
Absolutely. She had the cross. That's another interesting story. One of her friends was an actor called Canada Lee. If you remember the Cry the Beloved Country, the movie, this is going back, he was an actor. He was black. He was in the wedding party. I think he was the only black at West Point who was not a servant during that whole time. No, she had, my brother-in-law was a pretty good athlete. Some of the famous football players were even in the wedding party, like Glenn Davis and Blanchard and those things. So.
And what is he doing today?
He passed away. He retired. He was an executive with RCA.
That's right. Your sister was older.
Yeah, 7 years old.
What message would you like for someone, perhaps someone watching this interview, to take from your story?
I'm sorry, say that again?
What message would you like for someone to take from your story?
To me, the feeling of the dedication to the Constitution, democracy is extremely important. Would be because that's what it was for me. Now, if they get that through with the interview, that's what I would hope.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with us today?
And I can't think of anything else.
Thank you so much for your time, sir.
You're welcome.
And thank you for your service.